Look, we'll make a start. I'm not quite sure who's missing, if anybody, but I will start with the karakia. Whakataka taho ki te ura, whakataka taho ki te tonga, kia mā, kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, ti he mariora. Welcome everyone, and to this meeting. Could you please let democracy, the democracy advisor know if you intend to leave that meeting? And I appreciate that we're all on Zoom, so you may just need to send Heidi Muller a quick text or email if it's not obvious from the Zoom. We will schedule a break at 10:30 for approximately 10 minutes, but we'll confirm that when we break, because we'll try and break at an appropriate time. So are there any apologies? So no apologies, so we'll move on. I call on members to declare any conflicts of interest that they may have in relation to the items of the agenda.
Hello, I am speaking.
Councillor Panic, you're not on mute.
Good, thank you.
Okay, I'm used to. It's good being chair. You can mute people. Dangerous, as Councillor Fitzsimons tells me. So no, there's no conflicts of interest. I can't see any hands up. So I will now move the motion for the confirmation of minutes, that this committee approves the minutes from the Finance and Performance Committee meeting held on the 19th of August 2021, having been circulated, and that they're taken as read and confirmed as an accurate record of that meeting. Councillor Day?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Day, and Councillor Day second. For all those in favour, can you press the green reaction? Those against, red. And noting that Councillor Fitzsimons has got a hand up. Yeah. Councillor Young, I can see she's voted. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so that motion is carried. There are no items not on the agenda, and there are no requests for public participation. So we'll now move into general business, and with the first paper, which is the financial impact of COVID-19 for this current financial year to date. And I will get officers to, is it our CFO, Sarah Hay, or Martin Reid, who will be introducing this?
Martin Reid will be introducing the paper for us.
Thank you. Right, all yours, Martin.
Chair Calvert and councillors and committee members. Thank you. Yes, this is a fairly straightforward paper. And just to outline the impact of the last lockdown of COVID on the council's finances. So really, we're just looking at the impact that's uncontrollable, and really mainly from not being able to operate some of our services during lockdown. So most of that impact is a revenue impact, and losing during lockdown about 1.25 million a week during the lockdown. In total, what we did was model a scenario, and obviously the modelling was done earlier when the papers came out, and looked at a total impact of around $7 million lost revenue and extra expenses. On the operating expenses side, the increase in costs and the decrease in costs in different areas virtually mitigated each other, and so really most of the impact then relates back to the revenue loss. So for a scenario where we were in lockdown of level 4 for 2 weeks, level 3 for 2 weeks, and then level 2 for 4 weeks, we're looking at a total loss of just over $7 million. So from a cash flow perspective, we're also underspending CapEx because the capital programs couldn't carry on to the tune of around 6.6 million as well. And so while the operating loss, we're recommending funding by increasing debt by 7 million and then repaying that back over time. At the moment, from last year's lockdown, we've also repaying that debt over 15 years. So that would have about a 0.1% impact on rates for next year, in addition to the rates increase that's already forecast in the LTP. So the underspending CapEx of around 6.6 million would obviously reduce the debt by a similar amount. But as you'll note in the paper, there are also some other decisions that the council's already made that weren't budgeted for this year that will actually increase the debt as well by $13.2 million. And so the $6 million, you take off that and you've got basically a $7 million impact. And that would increase the debt to revenue ratio from the forecast of 226% to around 228% just from that COVID impact. I'll probably leave it there and take any questions through you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from anyone? Councillor Condi.
Thank you. Yes, I asked about the Waka Kotahi funding. In paragraph 15, we talk about Waka Kotahi having to look at cutting back on some of their funding, and was told that I would get an oral answer to that today, because I think one of the things I'm interested in is obviously the auditors looked at our long-term plan and looked at our assumptions around that and said that they were fairly confident. So I'm just interested in, is this a change that's happened since the long-term plan process? What's driving Waka Kotahi to have to make some of these decisions to cut back on what they were hoping to fund?
Yes, in short, I'm not over all the details of that, but yes, Waka Kotahi don't confirm their funding until I believe sometime in September. So that was after the LTP. So we were working on an estimate. We had reduced our estimate and on the likely proposition, I think it was about 85% of what we would normally expect. And it looks like it's come in under that. However, this the signal in this paper is maybe overstated now, so we're still working out those finer details, and that paper will come to you shortly once that's confirmed. So it's not confirmed yet.
Okay, so just that we did have in our long-term plan a conservative estimate that we wouldn't get everything from Waka Kotahi that we expected, and this is just the possibility that we would get even less than we were predicting.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Free.
Yeah, and I've just got a question about the airport underwrite. I believe that hasn't been called on to date. What do you consider the likelihood of it being called on?
That's very difficult for me to tell. So the airport has the underwrite still lasting for one more year. And the basis of that underwrite was some refinancing, and I believe they're going through that process right now. So there has been no need to call on that at the moment, and I've had no signal that would be called on. But we are in discussions with the airport and waiting for some information.
Oh, so can you just clarify for me the date at which the underwrite expires?
I believe it's the 30th of June 2022.
Okay, thank you.
And just Deputy Mayor, I know the officers are arranging a briefing from the airport, and I think there'll be an opportunity to ask that particular question of them directly. Councillor Foon.
Kia ora, thanks, Marty. Just recommendation for notes, the first instalment of rates payment due date has been extended by 1 month. How are we communicating that to our ratepayers so that they're aware of it?
I'm not in charge of that area, so I couldn't tell you exactly, but I know that people that have been asking, and it was really just a measure taken during the lockdown to allow people time to sort out their rates payments given the disruption. And what it actually really means is that we're not going to apply penalties, rates penalties for 1 month further than we otherwise would have. And so most people will be paying their rates in the normal time and process, but just for those that couldn't manage it, we've extended that payment. And so where they've asked and requested, that's been the information given back to them.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
So first of all, apologies. I can't get into diligence, so I can't see my notes that I made over all my papers. But basically the guts of it, because I am slightly winging it because of that, is that we have all these increased costs and reduced funding from NZTA. At what stage do we start reassessing where we are spending money and where we may not be spending money?
You guys all right?
Yeah. Sorry, that was a councillor just resetting up.
So
Yes,
I think you got it, Marty, didn't you?
Obviously, there's the standard reporting that's going to come through to you on the quarterly report, which will also have a forecast through to the year end. So, it is a little bit difficult with so many, I guess, balls in play, as it were, with a number of issues coming up, like the social housing paper coming up. Obviously, we've got water reforms on the go. We've got sludge paper coming up in this committee later today. There are a number of balls in the air, as it were, and the reporting on the actuals will come through in the normal fashion, regular quarterly reporting, and then we'll attempt to keep you up to date with, like this paper does, with some of the other decisions that have already been made that will be impacting on any issues like debt to revenue ratio.
Okay, because I did feel almost sick when I saw those figures. So just tell me with the NZTA, so I think, again, I'm doing it from memory, that that some of the things like walking improvements, something other else, and cycleways. Do we know, for example, which other cycleways are at threat? Because I mean, that's sort of rather contrary to what the lead story in today's paper about all the cycleways.
Yes, I'm not across the detail of that. We would have to come back to you on that and get Brad to do that. But a paper is coming to you on the revenue side, which will then explain, obviously, and give you options around the expenditure side, and what projects that funding is impacting.
So, Marty, at what stage do we are we discuss? I mean, if this was an individual, you'd be saying their finances look pretty shaky. At what stage do we get told we're insolvent?
You'll be told if you're insolvent, but you're nowhere near insolvent. But that, as I say, comes through the annual report, and the quarterly report will give us an up-to-date play against the budget and where are any impacts on the balance sheet at that point.
Okay, and just again, apologies because I can't access my notes on Diligent. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Can't see anybody else's hands up. All right, well, I will move this paper. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Officers are still gathering the information, still need to do a bit more work, and obviously look at what other activities they need to do in terms of other support we may need to provide. But as always, it needs to be evidence-based. So look, I'm going to move these recommendations. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Foon. Do you wish to speak?
I'll reserve.
Okay. Would anybody else like to speak to this? I can't see anybody's hands up. Councillor Foon, did you?
Thank you. So I do just want to thank officers for getting this information to us so quickly. It's really important that we take a moment to reflect on the financial outcome from last time and be reminded, but also be prepared to understand what we need to do as a council going forward. I particularly want to acknowledge the impact on council organisations and related organisations, but I probably also just want to outline the confidence going forward that we did such a great job of supporting our city last time, and it's been acknowledged, and so I think there's confidence that we will be supportive again, particularly around what we can do for our businesses and people that are really trying to do good by Wellington City. But let's see what the officers come back with on that. But thank you for all the work to date.
Thank you, Councillor Foon. And yes, as we know, we're still in the Delta level 2, so things are still shaping up. So so hopefully we will have a better picture of things by the time the next report comes back to us on this matter. So I will then put these recommendations. I've taken everybody's comfortable if we do them all together. So I will now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, could you please indicate, and those against indicate appropriately. Councillor Young, yep. And that's carried, looks like unanimously. Thank you. Right. Okay, so we're now moving on to the capital carry forward approval paper. I'm going to just welcome Deirdre Reedy to introduce the report.
Morena, councillors. I will just attempt to share my screen so I can run through this presentation with you on the report. Bear with me.
And Deirdre, could you make sure that this presentation gets emailed to the committee members?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm just going to use the presentation to brief on the paper, and we'll do an overview of where we are from a capital programme point of view last year, the capital delivery and the carry forward trends over a number of years, restated net underspend because there were some things that weren't included in the budget that were approved, the carry forward detail that you've already seen in the paper, underspend that's not been carried forward, and the town hall contingency, and then we'll just have a look at the carry forward impact on capital programme and debt. And feel free to ask any questions as we go through. So as stated in the paper.
Sorry, Councillor Young, you've got your hand up, or was that just to ask a question later on?
I'm asking a question later on.
Okay, thank you.
Like I said in the paper, the budget last year was 360 million. That included the carry forwards from last year. The actual spend was 267 million. So we had a reported variance of 94 million, and that was a 26% variance to our budget. That 267 million is still the largest capital programme we have delivered as a council. So we just wanted to show you what that capital programme trend has looked like over the last number of years. So this is showing the 2 previous LTPs. So obviously we have been behind that budget target every year, but the capital programme has been increasing exponentially every year as well. And we also just wanted to show what those carry forwards are looking like every year. So although they again have increased, the capital programme is increasing significantly as well. And I suppose the 2021 carry forward is significantly increased on previous years. But as noted in the paper, there are a number of items in there that were outside of our control, such as the town hall and that 7 million for Let's Get Welly Moving that didn't progress during the year. So there are a number of major projects. So I'm just going to run through this slide. I hope you guys can see it clearly. As I mentioned, the starting budget was 360 million. Later on in the year, there were a number of decisions, or throughout the year, there were a number of decisions made and approved through committee and through council to increase our spend in certain areas that weren't actually changed in our budget. So most notably Jerva Quay, that was quite late in the year and got delivered very quickly over that Queen's birthday weekend. That didn't go through as a budget change, but there was 4.2 million of spend there. Similarly, Mount Albert, the purchase of the quarry equipment and the carbon credit purchase that we spoke to during the LTP process. So although we spent that 6 million last year, that was actually taken out of year 1 and year 2 of the LTP with the intention of getting a preferential price towards the end of last year. Again, the budget was not adjusted for that, but the LTP budget was. And there was a small amount within the zoo renewals, 437k, which was netted by revenue as well. So again, we didn't amend the budget for that. Had those items been included in the budget, we would have had a budget of 376 million versus that spend of 267 million. So overall, if we were to say a revised position, our net underspend is 110 million rather than that 94. So we're requesting carry forward of 94 million, and then that results in a net underspend, in effect, a realistic net underspend of 15 million. Is there any questions on, sorry? Councillor.
Yeah, Deirdre, I think there might be a few questions on this slide in terms of being able to understand it. So are there any specific questions on this, the details so far? Councillor Young?
Yes, so just one is sort of related to this and one is definitely related to this. One definitely. So when we have this carry forward, does that mean, because I'm not an accountant, does that mean that we are rating people for stuff we haven't got a hope of doing? So we've basically got money in the bank.
There is a depreciation budget for included in the rates. So we obviously rate fund that depreciation. Most of our capital program is depreciated with a forward start date. So that capital program we will only start depreciating that when we expect it to be finished. So only the projects that we expect it to be finished throughout the year will have been depreciated for.
So Deirdre, thank you. So I'm not an accountant and most of our ratepayers are not accountants. Just what I really want to know is, are we, we've had a big rates increase. Mine is 16.24% plus my water bill. And I just want to know, so for people who are paying their rates, is that being used for stuff we are actually spending it on now? Or are we rating for stuff that we actually can't do at this stage?
In theory, we may be rating, we may be charging rates for depreciation for assets that have not been completed, but I don't have those numbers in front of me, and that's
no, and I don't need the numbers. It's just a thing in principle. And so the other thing is, and this is kind of related but not directly, I'm just interested to know with the town hall in particular, but also St. James, could someone at some stage give me how much we originally thought it was going to cost and what the costs are running at now? But I don't need an instant answer for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Condi?
Thank you. Just looking at that $15 million variance at the bottom of the page there, Deirdre, what is that? What happens to that $15 million? Because it kind of goes to Councillor Young's question of, is this $15 million that we've collected from ratepayers that nothing happens to? What is that $15 million? What does it mean? Where does it go? How does it get spent or not spent?
In essence, it's not spent. That is reducing our net debt position. So by virtue of the fact that we are not spending that, we will have a reduced debt position. And we did at the start of the year have a lower debt position than we would have expected at the start of the year.
So it's just that we don't call down that $15 million worth of debt that we thought we might have to, which means therefore we're not having to pay interest costs and depreciation costs on projects that haven't been finished yet.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Foon.
Thanks, Deirdre. It might be a bit more of a technical question around the carbon credit purchase. That's quite a high amount. I was just trying to work out over 100,000 tonnes. How long do we expect that, I'm going to call it an investment, to last us for in terms of years, or are we back paying it? Are we back paying it or are we prepaying it?
So in effect, we've prepaid it. That equated to 2 years of budget for the LTP. So that those carbon credits are sitting as assets in our balance sheet, and as we are required to relinquish them, that will obviously reduce. Those number of credits we hold will reduce. What we can't account for at this point in time is things like the unique emissions factor changing, or any other factors at the landfill changing that would change the best estimate of how long they will last for.
Thank you, that's really useful.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Foster. Mayor Foster, you're on mute. Mayor Foster? Well, okay, look, we'll just carry on.
Sorry, I had to put the screen up to full screen first before I could actually say anything.
Right.
3 questions if I can. Just go to the carbon credit one. So, Deirdre, when did we start purchasing carbon credits?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. We have certainly been purchasing carbon credits for the last 4 years.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It'd just be interesting to see what the trajectory would be of, because obviously that's a cost which we're starting to incur, which at one point in time we wouldn't have been incurring, but we are now. Okay. So second question is just in terms of those budget expectations, which some people have talked about, effectively what that does, because we've had a lot of discussions over the years about we never fully spend the capital budget. Usually we're 15 to 20% light, sometimes higher. But are we still budgeting on the basis that we would spend everything? In other words, that the interest and depreciation costs are included for everything that is relevant to a particular year? Yes, and bearing in mind that with the interest cost, we are starting from, at any point in time, we're starting from our net debt position is how we. Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So in terms of the questions that have been asked, I mean, either effectively we are in effect overcharging for any given year, but then any saving, which there is always going to be a saving, will flow through into the following years to then be used as a surplus to potentially offset rates in the following year. Yes. Yeah. Have you given any thought? And I know it's difficult because every different project will be depreciated at a different rate. Pipes maybe 1% a year, and a computer technology is 33% a year or thereabouts. But have you given any thought, because we've had this conversation a lot, about whether we could actually say, well, we're not actually going to fully, not actually going to budget for the full interest and depreciation on a full capital program, because we know that we're not going to deliver the lot. We'll take X% of it out on the basis of past history and rate accordingly. There has been a number of discussions about that. I guess that would require a change to our policy, because our policy is that we fully fund depreciation. But that may be something Sarah would like to comment on. Yeah. No, it wouldn't. It would still be, you'd be fully funding depreciation. It's just that you know that you're not actually going to spend that money, therefore you're not actually depreciating it. But it's going to be a judgment call as to how much you would, not be spending in any given year. That's right, Andy. And it does become, as you can imagine, very complex if you
over or underestimate in any given year, and how you then catch that up over an annual plan cycle versus an LTP cycle. So I think the more appropriate place for the conversation is a bit of a discussion document coming back to the committee at some point, rather than potentially on the fly now.
No, I wasn't suggesting for a second doing it on anything on the fly. It's just that this has been something which we've had conversations with over quite a number of years. So I think it is worth us nailing that down. And the final thing, Chair, is just Councillor Young asked about the Town Hall St James. It'd be good if we're going to get a comparison of the costs, getting a comparison of the costs against the actual project as it is. So when we started the Town Hall project, for example, that wasn't even remotely the same kind of project that it is now. So it will be a completely unfair comparison, but it will be fair to compare it with where we started in 2019. That's me.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Councillor Pennant.
Thank you very much, Chair. Look, officers, great to hear that we've spent more CapEx than usual. I'm just wondering, but obviously there's still the underspend. So with the project management office that will be working more effectively, how do you think that that will help with making sure that we do spend more money? And what will be different to the last time we had a project office? Thank you.
Can I just check, is Mike Mendonça on the call?
Yeah, yes, I am.
Do you want to answer that one?
So thanks, Councillor, and good morning, councillors. Look, we're just ramping up the effort with the project management office now, focusing on specifically doing health checks on the most significant projects. It is our intention, once we have that up and running, to start bringing those health checks to you regularly on a quarterly basis. And indeed, we're using some of that effort now to feed into the report that we have coming to you next month on the state of the construction industry and the labour and supply chain issues that we have.
So Mike, you've been around for a while. I'm not sure if you were here when we last had the project management office. What's going to be different this time, just so we can set it up for success?
So last time around, and thank you, yes, Councillor, I have been here for a while, but last time, what we did with the PMO is we had actually delivering projects. This time around, it's our intention not to do that, but rather to focus on governance and on processes, on boards, on reporting, to imbue the discipline across the organisation rather than having it actually delivering the projects. So the projects and the accountability remains in the line, rather than being kind of centralised and crossing lines of accountability. That's the fundamental difference this time around.
Okay, so we'll still continue to deliver as many projects as we can. Obviously, that's an ongoing issue about how much contracting there is.
I think that's an ongoing issue that's wider than just the PMO, and as I say, we do have some advice coming to you on that.
Okay, thank you. I think councillors might want to have some further discussion on that, but I'll leave it for now. Thanks.
Okay, so look, I really want to just keep to this presentation, and then we can then sort of more general questions can be asked, because this is one part of it. So Deputy Mayor Free, are your questions in relation to what we've seen in this presentation so far?
Actually, my question's been answered. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, Deirdre, let's carry on, and any further questions on this presentation we can deal with at the end of it.
Thank you, Chair. So, as I noted, there's a restated net underspend of 15 million after the requested carry forward. So I just wanted to address what those ones were. I've skipped ahead, I'll go back. The underspend that's not being carried forward relates to a couple of key projects. One being the bus priority planning, which was 6 million. That is now part of the overall Let's Get Welly Moving programme that was included in the LTP. So obviously, because we're coming off the back of an annual plan year into an LTP, there are some things that have been already captured within the LTP reprogramming, and that's one of them. The 3 waters, renewals and upgrades, this would be similar every year, where this programme of work is an ongoing budget. So we budget for that every year, and it's part of the programme with Wellington Water. So again, that programme has been restated as part of the LTP, and there is no need to carry that forward. Everything that Wellington Water want to deliver is included in their LTP programme. And sorry, it's the transport renewals and upgrades is the one that we do budget every year. We allow for that. And so there isn't any need to carry that forward because they already have budget next year for it. So that's 2.8 million of a significant budget. It's, you know, that's a relatively small portion of their budget. So you'll have seen this carry forward detail in the paper. So what we were wanting to call out here was just those prominent projects that are part of the strategic objectives of the LTP, and that's why we need to carry them forward and why there's quite a large carry forward in that number. So that's 78.5 million. And then the balance of that 15 million what we were calling residual carry forwards is made up of a number of less prominent projects. So things like our digitalization of services project, that is 1.6 million. Things like our coastal renewals, which again is something that's ongoing, but there is some specific projects the PSR want to carry that money forward for, and that's 2.4 million. And then things like, you know, there's a kind of a plethora of smaller projects, but that are in train. Things like the library materials upgrade, which is 600,000 that we want to carry forward to ensure we have the material for when Tamatapihi is operational in a few years' time. So obviously we had a couple of questions about the town hall contingency, and we wanted to explain that and work through it. We're trying to carry up, I suppose, cover off a couple of things around the town hall here. So I'm going to try and work through that. There's three key things. We wanted to outline through this process the contingency that's been required to date. So some of you will remember that as part of the 27th of February meeting in 2019, we agreed a budget for the town hall of 112.4 million. We also agreed a contingency provision of 24.3 million. And we noted that the contingency could be between 9 million and 35 million. So quite a range of contingency at that point in time. Obviously, we're very aware that there's been, you know, having started that project, there are a number of things that have come up through that. There's also been cost escalations since that February 19th meeting. So the contingency that's been required to date for the project progress to date has been 12.3 million. So we wanted to highlight that through this process, and in effect use this process to approve that as a budget change. So that contingency was never sitting as part of the original budget, but we want to now highlight that that needs to be added to the original budget of 112. The intention is that we will use this project process each year for just 2 years to let you know what that contingency requirement is and adjust the budget accordingly. So when we're looking at budget reporting and whole of life project reporting, that you're getting the correct picture around spend versus budget, including contingency. So just to give you a couple of examples of what that contingency has been spent on, there is a whole raft, and the project team showed me pages yesterday of the requirement for that contingency, and so they've got quite a lot of detail on that. But some of the key ones are things like dewatering the site being 1.8 million, screw piles being 2.2, temporary works to support the roof trusses that I think we weren't, you know, that wasn't evident when the project started, 600,000. And again, cracked floors in the upper level that wasn't evident when the project was planned, that's 300,000. And there's a raft of minor ones as well that sit underneath that. So then the carrying on from that, what we wanted to, then the next thing we wanted to note was that because we didn't include that contingency in the budget to start with, the budget is overspent. So the budget is overspent in the life of the project to date by 7.6 million. And when you acknowledge the fact that we needed the 12.3 million of contingency and the budget is overspent by 7.6, there's a mismatch there. And that mismatch in effect is the unprogressed portion of the project. So what we thought we'd do from a progress point of view versus what we've actually done from a progress point of view. And so the balance is 4.6 million, and that's what we are asking to carry forward. In any other smaller project situation, we wouldn't be asking to carry forward in a position where the budget is overspent. But the overspend relates to the contingency, and the balance of that is actually the unprogressed portion of work that we need to carry forward. So carrying on from that, we just wanted to show the carry forward impact on the capital programme. So you'll see the yellow and slightly mustard bars are actual versus budget. So the graph that we looked at further up the presentation. And then the black bar is what we have in the LTP. And the grey bar is when we then include the proposed carry forward in that. So we know that of the 94 million carry forward, 77 of that is being requested to be carried forward into the current year, because those projects are largely in train. So there's a significant increase in the LTP budget based on this carry forward process. And then just a quick look at what that does to our debt, and I suppose following on from some of the questions that you raised with Marty in the previous paper, this is a very linear presentation of that debt piece, because we know there are a number of other factors at the minute, but ultimately what we've done here is said what was our LTP debt position, and the LTP debt to income ratio for year one was 226%. If we take nothing else into account other than the 77 million of carry forwards, that ratio would go to 230%. And that's it from me.
Thank you, Deirdre. Are there any questions of officers? Deputy Mayor, I think you've got your hand up still.
Yeah, look, I'm really sorry that accounting is always such a mystery to me, to be really honest. I'm trying to get my head around the fact that I know the contingency sort of slightly confuses things, that we've needed a higher contingency or we needed to call on the contingency, but I'm really struggling to get my head around the fact that we're spending less and yet our debt position is worse. And also how that relates to our loss of income. Is that why our debt position is worse in terms of the debt to revenue ratio? Can you please really try and explain it very simply? Because it seems counterintuitive to me, and I'm not sure if it's just my thinking or whether it's genuinely counterintuitive.
No, it's a really good question. Actually, it's something I should have included, and I'm sorry for that. So, like I mentioned earlier, we do our LTP debt on our starting net debt position. So that in effect already included some of this underspend. So we didn't assume that we were going to, because we weren't borrowing during last year, because we were underspent, we didn't assume that we would spend the entire program last year. So our starting position was probably lower than you would have expected for the LTP. We are now coming through and adding that increase in to the debt position, and that's why we get that difference in the ratio. So the starting point was lower because we knew we were behind, and you'll remember through those quarterly reports we were showing that there was a 20-25% expectation of underspending capital programme, and some of that was reflected in our opening debt position for the LTP.
So we were a bit optimistic with our debt position at the beginning when we maybe shouldn't have been that optimistic. Is that what you're saying?
I guess it's the basis that we start from is the current debt position. And yes, we did include a carry forward, but we didn't include a carry forward of the value of 77 million.
I'm afraid I still don't really understand why we spent less and yet appear to be worse off. It just doesn't still make sense to me. Maybe I need to have a tutorial on it offline.
Bear in mind as well that that debt position is the year-end position. So we're not talking about, so the 226% that we included in the LTP is what we expect the ratio to be at the end of this financial year. By now layering the 77 million in, we're adding to the overall debt requirement. And by the end of the year, when we're saying we will have spent 420 million instead of 343, that difference between the 420 and the 343 is what's driving up that ratio at the year end.
Okay, that does explain a little bit to me a little bit. I think I still need the tutorial, but thank you.
I'm sure that can be arranged, Deputy Mercury, at some point. Councillor Condi.
Thanks. Sarah, I'm right there with you. Actually, my question is pretty much the same thing. So, so Deirdre, I guess, first of all, can you confirm what I think I'm hearing is that when we put together the long-term plan, we assumed that we weren't going to deliver the full capital program that we budgeted, that we would have some carry forward. But what we've actually delivered is more than we forecast, but less than we budgeted. Is that where we're up to?
We start calculating our debt on our current debt position. So if that was 100 million, we start with that, and then we start layering on all of the things. So we're layering on our capital program, we're layering on anything that we're debt, any OPEX that we're debt funding. What we also layered into that was 53 million of expected carry forwards because we knew we hadn't spent. So we layered that into the calculation, but now that carry forward isn't 53, it's 77.
Okay, but where I get confused is it's just a timing difference, right? Because we would have borrowed the debt anyway at some point. It's just that we're borrowing it a year later than we planned. So I don't, if you can go to your line graph there, what I don't understand is why the carry forward line is higher. To me, it makes sense that it would be later in time. Do you know what I mean? That we would reach it in a future year because we would spend that eventually. But we always plan to spend that $77 million. We always plan to borrow it.
Can I add something there?
Please.
So Councillor Condi, the main and significant difference is we actually, if you look at the graph that shows what we carried forward in previous years, you'll see that this year we are carrying forward much more. So we assumed that we would carry forward less, around about at the same sort of ending position. So we forecasted that we would underspend the capital program materially the same as what we did, but we didn't forecast we would carry forward as much as we are. And that sort of residual leftover not carried forward amount that you saw, which Deirdre I think was about 12 or 13 or 17 million in one of those slides, that in our previous assumptions in the LTP was higher. So what we wouldn't be carrying forward was a higher amount, so our debt to revenue would be lower. We're carrying forward more than we expected.
But actually probably more significant from a ratio point of view is the fact that whatever dollar we add in, the revenue is not changing now. So that's kind of really what's driving the change in the ratio. So yes, we are adding in additional capital cost, but our revenue is staying the same. We're not changing that other side of the equation.
Yeah, but here's where I don't get it, which is that we're not adding in debt. What we're saying is instead of borrowing $77 million in 2019-20, we're going to borrow $77 million in 2020-21. So even if the carry forward amount was different, so under the LTP assumptions, we were assuming we were going to spend that money in 2019-20 or 2020-21 delivering building stuff, and therefore we would have borrowed it anyway. So we're just borrowing the same amount of money in a later year. So this idea that we're adding something in makes no sense to me. So maybe we are going to have to actually dig into this offline. I don't want to totally derail it, but I'm still not there, Sarah. So you're not the only one.
We can think about how we can better present that and send it through to you.
Yeah, if I can just carry on, I think this is a concern to me because I'm not stupid with numbers. I actually do understand numbers. So the fact that I don't understand this and don't get it, I do feel concerned about that. And the other thing is I wanted to ask you with my second question, is this a big risk for council if we don't accurately predict our capital program? is it actually causing us an extra risk because it's more expensive somehow?
Sarah, hey, would you?
Yeah, sorry, I was giving a
on
space to see if Deidre was going to answer that.
I feel that this is completely unclear, actually.
Sarah, I think it's fair to say that it is complex. And so there are a lot of moving parts when you're talking about a ratio, and given the net starting position of the debt, how that moves, what you actually borrow over the year and what your revenue does, all impacts on that picture. So I will take the feedback that we need to be able to illustrate that in a clearer way and step councillors through that. And part of this presentation was aiming to do that, but perhaps we need more workshop formats on this topic. But part of the paper on these carry forwards does recommend that each of the committees need to consider what impact this has on their overall capital program. So yes, there is risk in the capital program. We flagged that, at the LTP stage, and what we can deliver at what date will be something that we need to talk through. But I wouldn't say it's a risk to the organisation if we do that exercise thoroughly.
Okay. Thank you, because I do think we need to understand this, because if we are overly ambitious and put things into our budgets that we can't deliver, I want to actually understand if that's causing us additional financial risk.
Yeah, and the as you'll see through the annual report process that we're about to go through, what we report is actuals rather than the our forecasted debt position is what we plan against, but remember we report against the actuals. So we do go through that process both at a quarterly basis and at the annual report time.
I think it's also important to note that the recommendations in this paper is not about changing the debt to income ratio amount at this stage, noting that there is some more work needed. Really what officers are recommending that we agree to carry forward the underspend from last year, not to make any judgment calls about whether some of those projects in themselves should be going ahead. So, but that will happen as noted in the actual paper, with this further information coming and will be discussed by the Infrastructure Committee next month, and with other work going forward, which will then enable, I think, for officers to have an opportunity with elected members in informing them and really getting everybody on the same page about what this debt to income ratio looks like. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Sarah Hay, is that how can we improve the accuracy of our capital expenditure budgets in terms of what we plan to do, because obviously we never hit the. We never really that close, and particularly in the last few years, to what the budget is. And I'm not sure how we compare to other similar type of organisations as well. So I just wonder if you've got any comments or thoughts on that.
So I can tell you from an Auckland Council perspective, they always struggled to deliver their capital program as well. It was about a 25% when I first started there. It was around the 30% under delivery, and they improved up to about the 25% mark. From improving the planning and budgeting of the capital program, there's two lenses. One, from a Treasury perspective, we do forecast an under delivery from a Treasury management perspective. So we're not expecting to borrow as much as the total capital program suggests. From a budgeting, planning and management perspective, that is what we use the quarterly performance reporting for. So councillors can understand what our actual performance is against the target and take any actions that might be necessary at that point. Deidre, is anything you want to add from a performance perspective or planning?
I think the only thing to add is that we are aware that throughout the year, we tend to, over a number of years, we tend to have a ramp up in that capital spend reporting towards the end of the year. So throughout the year, it's a little bit harder to forecast the phasing of that. But that's something that we will look to do very acutely through this process of bringing the programme back to committee over the next 2 months.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of officers? Doesn't seem to be. So look, I'm going to move these recommendations, and really I just I suppose in a nutshell for this paper is just alerting us to the fact we need to about a carry forward over, but there is a significant amount of work still to be done in understanding what this actually does mean for our capital expenditure program going forward. So that we can, how do we get to be a bit more accurate in terms of what we can actually deliver, and as opposed to what we say we want to deliver, and so as part of that, so we're quite clear about what projects we want to deliver, but we need to be clear as well as what can actually be delivered now, because we've had a lot of external shocks, COVID, supply shortages of materials, and also the access to skilled labour and professional services is becoming an increasing issue, not just for this council, but for many other organisations around. So we're not alone in this. It is something being faced by all organisations and even households across the country. So, and that's where there's quite a few recommendations here, and a lot of them are also about not only the financial carrying forward various amounts, but also signalling that further work does need to be done and further information does need to come back to the various committees so that we can make an informed decision overall about what this actually means and what options there are for us. So all the recommendations are there as per the paper, and I just wonder, have I got a seconder?
Diane, can I just ask, you were going to propose some amendments, but I don't think you've actually included them. Is that
no?
Okay.
It's not good. We're not putting it in. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think Councillor Fern, you signalled that you would like to second. Yeah. Would you like to speak?
I'll hold.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Councillor Condé.
Thank you. Just to say that this is, obviously this is a significant carry forward that we're looking at this year, and we were hoping that we would be able to deliver a bit more of the capital program than this. But I think goes to the work that we've been hearing about from ELT about we really need to gear up the organisation to be able to deliver on our ambitions. And so this is really the work that we've that's why I'm really keen to hear back to the Infrastructure Committee about the progress on the Enterprise Project Management Office, our strategic asset management work, all the procurement work that's happening, because that's all the work that's being done inside the organisation to make our boat go faster so that we can deliver on our ambitions with these capital programs. So I'm really, really keen to see all that work and to hear on how we're progressing so that we actually are gearing up to try and deliver on a capital program going forward. So, looking forward to that, to seeing all of that work and seeing how we can, whatever we can do to help the organisation deliver on these capital programs. Thank you.
Now, look, it's 10:30. I've got two, so far I've got Deputy Mayor Free and Councillor Pannett who'd like to speak. Are there likely to be any other speakers? Because I can't see anybody's hands up. Are you, or is everyone comfortable if we carry on and listen to the next two speakers? And then if there's any more, then we'll take a break. But if there isn't, we'll proceed with the paper, with the vote. Deputy Mayor Free?
Yes, I really want to endorse what Councillor Conti has said. I think it's always a challenge to deliver a capital program, but we have set some very, very ambitious targets, and it's now up to us as governors to really understand how we can support and help the organisation consistently move forward to deliver on that. And, that does mean staying the course and, within the, obvious parameters of still providing oversight and governance, really do our bit to smooth the way to deliver, because it's never easy to deliver. That's why we do get councils around the country consistently under delivering on capital programs. But as we can see, it leads to complexity and I actually feel some significant financial risks as well if we don't actually stick to what we plan to do, and also reputational risks. So I think we're carrying forward, and much of what we're carrying forward is to finish things that are already in flight. We obviously need to do that and to also commit to carry on with the program we've got. And I really agree with Councillor Condi. It's for us to actually ask ourselves how we help the organisation do that and help our CEO manage the organisation to really fine tune it and deliver, to become what she always talks about, which is a high performing council that will deliver for us on our ambitions. So thank you. Happy to support all of these recommendations.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Free. Councillor Planet.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I'd just like to thank you, Chair, for your leadership on this issue, and I look forward to the report to the Infrastructure Committee as per recommendation 7. I think that's really important. And I'd just like to raise briefly, this is not the time for a big debate on it now, but this issue of the Project Management Office. I think it's great that we're going to get some more oversight of projects. I think it's obviously critical in local government land. We spend a lot of money and we need to make sure these projects go right. I think there's a space for discussion about whether we do use this office to deliver some projects as well. It might not have worked as well as it should have last time, and we can reflect on that. But maybe there is a space too. And obviously, I'm keen to see council do more rather than sending it out to external partners to do that. I believe government should be able to do this. And of course, increasing the capacity is really, really critical when we're going to be doing masses of infrastructure work. So much building's got to be done, very, very complex. Bike lanes, earthquake strengthening, light rail. We're going to need a lot of capacity. But I think it's fantastic that this office is coming back, and I look forward to further discussion about how it all works.
Thank you, Councillor Planet. Councillor Foon, did you wish to speak?
Very quickly, thank you for all the comments that have been made, and thank you to Chair. I want to acknowledge your leadership for this today. But what I do want to point out is in the graphs, actually, we saw the increase in what has been achieved. And so I think it's what we're looking at the cup, quarter empty, but actually that means it's 3/4 full. So I just want to acknowledge the organisation for all the work that we have actually been able to achieve. And I do want to call to just also talk about the annual plan process, that makes it a really exciting read when we have the opportunity to monitor the performance at that time. Great, kia ora, that's all from me.
Thank you. And I don't think there's no real right of reply, so I'm not going to keep speaking just for the sake of it. So look, there is more work to be done on this, and this will come through the various committees over the next few months. And it is important that we get further information coming through so that we can make those informed decisions. So look, is there anyone that wants to take any of these recommendations separately? All happy, we'll take them all together. Okay, so look, I will move the motion, which has been seconded by Councillor Foon. It will be all the recommendations 1 through to 10. And you'll have those papers in front of you. If you could please vote accordingly. So who's that? Oh, is Mayor Foster there? Oh, yes, he's voted. Yeah. Okay, so it's 10:35. Are you all comfortable with a 10-minute break, or do you want a 15-minute break? 10? Okay, right. We'll go for 10. So that will be, we'll start again at 10:46 a.m. Thank you all. Are you able to take the ticks off, or I don't know how to do that? Okay. Right. Okay.
To remove the ticks, you just click on it again and it disappears.
Okay.
It's quite complex, that.
Technology.
Even I can manage to do it.
Well, that's saying something, Councillor Sparrow.
It sure is, Councillor Covert.
I think the timing, it looks like everybody's going to get a break between the end of this meeting and the next. It could be famous last words. Okay, shall we? Yep. Okay, let's make it. We are going to make a start. Could I just ask if elected members of your back, could you just turn your videos on even for just a short minute, so AD can just make sure who's here. Right. Thank you all. Thank you, everybody. Yep, that's fine. Thank you. You can. You're welcome to hide your face now if you want. Okay, so next paper. I hope Councillor Foon is back. The sludge minimisation facility. I'd like to welcome Heath George to introduce the report. If Heath is available.
Madam Chair, I'll introduce the report.
Okay.
Heath can jump in and support you with any questions if they get to a too technical level of detail.
Okay.
So this report is ready to provide an update on the process that we have been undertaking with the Crown to use the Infrastructure Funding and Financing Act for delivery of the proposed sludge minimisation facility at Mile Point. It's a bit of a reminder about why we want to use this legislation for sludge, and I'll probably step through that just so we've got the right context as we consider the report. So firstly, $200 million is a significant investment for council to find at the front end of our LTP. You'll all be aware, because of recent conversations about the residual waste and the future of the southern landfill, that we're actually under a time constraint to come up with a solution for sludge, and it's at the same time where we've all got a number of other competing investments in the LTP. So this is a really good opportunity to look at an off-balance sheet solution for funding and financing that project so it can be accelerated. And there's two more reasons why IFF is a good opportunity for sludge. So secondly is the context around water reform that we need to consider. Sludge, the current treatment plant at Mile Point is operating effectively. And so because there's no current and pressing need from a water infrastructure perspective to upgrade the facility or add this additional technology, there is a concern that our landfill capacity issues and our aspirations to minimise waste might not float to the top of any investment priorities that the new water entities might have. So anyway, we can accelerate and progress this project is a good opportunity for us. And I think the third reason why sludge is a great candidate for IFF is because of its attractiveness to the financiers. We expect to get a really good financial deal through the SPV because of the sludge project's impact on carbon reduction, the waste minimisation opportunities, but also the resilience improvement it provides. So that's a really attractive project that financiers would want to invest in. And fortunately, the Crown agrees. So the Crown's excited to be progressing this project with us. We've had excellent engagement with Crown Infrastructure Partners and the Treasury and HUD to date on the project. the board and the relevant ministers of CIP have agreed to progress this as a priority project for Crown Infrastructure Partners this year, and therefore they've ramped up a project team to help us designing the right structure for the SPV, the special purpose vehicle, and getting us to financial close, which is effectively, once we know the design and the cost of the project, we've identified the beneficiaries, we can then start raising and drawing down that finance for the project. So I'll take the paper as read and happy to answer any questions that there might be.
Okay, and before committee members get into questions, can I just ask you to keep your questions in relation to the funding and financing part of this? So I know that you may well have some burning issues about the actual project, but I'm sure there'll be lots of opportunities to do that in a infrastructure committee meeting, which I certainly don't want to step on any toes there. So, Councillor Young.
Oh, sorry. I'm so just again, I will apologise. I can't access my diligent notes, but just thinking about the sludge, and there was something there about we have to work with the airport for the land, and I'm just thinking. So, at one stage, on one hand, we want to work with them, on the other hand, you know, we're going against them on things like the Cobham Street. Well, not we, but some are going against them on the Cobham Street crossing, and also the seawall. So I'm just wondering whether we need perhaps a more joined up approach with the airport, because if we want favours from them, we can't also kick them in the teeth.
So through you, Madam Chair, we've had a really positive engagement with the airport over this land transaction. It's not necessarily a favour when there's a commercial return when you're purchasing something off an airport. There is a bit of coordination that will be required to ensure that the transaction considers the businesses around the site and all the other aviation regulations that come with building something near an airport. But to date, I can say those interactions have been extremely positive.
That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Councillor Foon.
Thanks, Sarah. Just two questions from me. Do we have any idea on the timeline when we will know what the levy will be and when will it start? And the second question is just around the last conversation we've had, really around anticipated costs and cost increase because of COVID on resources. Are we on track with the costing, and do we have any idea when we'll know what the levy is?
Yeah, sure. And Heath, please feel free to jump in anytime. The understanding the levy really comes down to identifying what the total project cost will be, because then the levy is a portion of that shared across X number of people over X number of years. What we're proposing and what we'll be bringing to the Infrastructure Committee as the next milestone in the procurement strategy is that we engage the market through an early contractor involvement approach, which gets the people who will be delivering the treatment plant, the two parts, the thermo drying and the lysis digestion, in to do the design with us, with the design consultants. That enables us to get cost surety much sooner in the process. And as much cost surety we can get also helps with our engagement with Treasury, because effectively at the end of the day, the Treasury wear the residual risk, which is what enables us to take the cost off our own balance sheet. And so that's effectively what we're working towards by financial close, which we're aiming for the end of this financial year. Heath, is there anything you want to add on the time frame and the approach for that? Otherwise, I'll go into the supply risks piece.
Yes, Sarah, and good morning, councillors. It's worth noting that as part of our engagement with CIP, we'll be making some choices about when the levy will start. So there's the opportunity to what they call is to ramp the levy up over a period of time. So there's no certainty about what that would look like right now. We do need to wait until we get final costings, or we get costings and also the government service, government package and how those things relate to the levy before we make those decisions. But there are some options on which we're going to have to make choices on in the coming 6 to 9 months.
Thanks, Heath. So from a supply perspective, this is this is a challenging project regardless of whether there's COVID or no COVID. There are very few manufacturers of these types of plants internationally. But as I mentioned earlier, it is a really attractive project. And so the people who do this have been engaging with Wellington Water to date, and we will continue to engage through this process to make sure that we are securing that supply at the right time.
Okay, it's all right. Mayor Foster.
Yes, thank you. 4 questions if I can. First one of them, Sarah, can you just tell us what you would predict the relative funding cost to be versus of this kind of model versus the traditional funding arrangement? Obviously, I completely get the debt headroom, but I just wanted to understand what the difference is, because you sort of gave me some indications about that before.
My expectation is that it's comparable. Heath, are we getting any more clarity of that yet, or is that through to come through the process?
It's to come through the process. We have not discussed absolute financing costs just yet.
Yeah, and there'll be a market process, Mayor Foster, when we take the project to the financiers, and that's when we will get the best competitive deal that we can and compare it to the counterfactual, which is us doing it ourselves.
Okay, so we will do that comparison.
Yes,
that's really important. That's really important. Okay, cool. The second one is just in terms of the water reforms process. If the water reforms, and it was interesting seeing the comment there, this is exactly the kind of project which a large entity might go, yeah, no, sorry, Wellington, not going to do that. But if the water reforms happen, how does the traditional financing model and the financial cost model, how do they play with the reforms?
So it is our
difference.
No, I suppose the only difference will be at the end of the day, where does the asset vest to? And over the period of the recovery of the levy, who's doing that transaction? So is that on the rate bill or the water services entity bill? We don't expect it to make a difference whether at the stage where you're raising the finance, whether that's in a water reform context or not. It shouldn't make a difference to the project.
Okay. So I mean, conventionally it will be debt funded as opposed to IFF funded, but IFF funded is effectively debt funded anyway.
To an SPV, through an SPV,
cool.
yes.
Yep, cool. Okay, cool. Then the next question I got, question 3, there's some comments on page 27 about trying to work out which catchment benefits from this, which is an interesting one, because obviously we've got 3 treatment plants that we use at the moment. Just what's your thinking about that in terms of network? Because I can see that, say, for example, from a DC point of view, we would say this catchment needs this wastewater or this, this water or whatever it might be. So I'm interested in your thinking about that. I'm also interested in the Pūroro plant at the moment is the trucks pick up the sludge and take it through direct to the landfill for being dewatered. How would that work technically with this, and would that also be captured in this? Yeah.
Yes. So I'm not going to get into the detail of how the sludge will move around the city. I'll leave that for either Mike or the infrastructure committee. But
that's fine.
The beneficiaries, I think I would. The first question I'd ask before I get to the catchment discussion is actually, could we view it as a broader benefit for the city because of the landfill benefits we get and the waste minimisation?
That was kind of where I was going.
So that's kind of the first goal. Could we make the citywide benefit? And then second, if that doesn't necessarily meet all the requirements of the Act, then we drop it down to a catchment.
Yeah, okay, that's going to be an interesting one. And the final question then is just in terms of the wild stuff, does this relate in any way to the designation? Because I know that I know there's some issues around the designation, there were some conditions around that southern end, and I know Wellington Water's interested in that, but I thought that was for pipes rather than for sludge treatment.
My understanding is that it already has the correct designation because of Moa Point treatment plant. I don't think there's any issues there, but if Beth or Mike are on the line, or Heath, if you know. Hi, Mike.
Yes, Sarah, you're basically right, but there might be some minor tweaks. So fundamentally it's okay, but there are we're still looking at it, Mayor Foster, but there are a couple of tweaks. And just while I'm on, so the sludge from Kāwai does go to Moa Point under this deal. So yep.
But it doesn't. Does it go to Moa Point? Or
It will go to Moa Point under this model. Yeah.
Can we,
Under
yeah,
this model. Okay, cool. Yep.
I just want to keep questions to
Cool,
the
thank you.
actual thing of this paper. Thank you. Councillor Pennant.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I've heard your last reminder, but yeah, I just was a bit confused about the catchment issue because I thought everyone was going to use this vehicle. It wasn't just going to be some parts of the city.
Mike, I'll refer to you. I'm not sure you can make sludge from Tahua go to Moa Point. There's Mike, over to you.
Yeah, that's the fundamental issue, because all of our sewage from north of Johnsonville north goes to Titahi Base. So the key issue is whether or not those people are the beneficiaries of the scheme.
So that's the only part of the city that wouldn't be the beneficiaries?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Right. So it's quite defined then. Okay. No, I
Yes.
understand. Thanks so much.
All right. Councillor Condi.
Sorry, pushing all the wrong buttons. Thank you. Sarah, this is a bit of a performative question, but just wanted to kind of acknowledge the work from Wellington Water, and just, can you just talk about the fact that we're not restructuring or bringing this project in-house because we have any concerns about Wellington Water and how they've delivered it? It's really just about structuring the risk and what Treasury have said we need to do to kind of meet the requirements of the IFF.
Absolutely, Councillor Condi. We wouldn't be here if Wellington Water hadn't championed this project for us to date, and they've done a really good job in that, and that's reflected in the fact that all of the project team from Wellington Water are now the project team in Wellington City Council. So it's exactly the same people, just from a contracting perspective. Wellington City Council is the principal to the contract rather than through Wellington Water. It reduces some of our risks. It streamlines a bit of the governance around this, and it removes one of the areas of complexities when you're dealing with a pretty complex space with SPVs, Crown, Treasury, financiers, Council, Wellington Water in that mix as well. Yeah, it's from a risk and complexity perspective rather than any kind of performance perspective.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that our mates over there. I do kind of have another question about the beneficiaries, which is, I guess I can see that we've got landfill benefits and carbon reduction benefits that accrue to the whole city. And then we've got wastewater benefits that just accrue to those whose wastewater goes there, which means everybody except north of Johnsonville. Mm-hmm. Do we have to choose one of those beneficiaries, or could we say 50% of the project benefits are landfill and therefore they go to everybody, and 50% of the project benefits are wastewater and therefore they go to this catchment, or does that get too complicated?
Yeah, I mean, my starting position for anything is always simplicity is best. However, you can get, the beneficiary identification and calculation is the most complex part of the Act, and you can cut it multiple ways, and that's exactly the sort of mahi we're doing at the moment across my team and CIP.
When will we hear back about that? Because I assume that's not going to come to infrastructure committee. So I'm just curious what the timeline is on that.
I saw a spreadsheet yesterday, Heath. Heath, what's the time frame on that?
Well, I hate to be non-committal, but we're working through a number of complications in that area, councillors. One of which is the difference between residential and commercial. And as you know, our inner city has a significant amount of imported people during the week, and therefore they create a lot of wastewater. And so we are being cognizant of all of these different drivers of waste, and looking to try and reflect that in the way that we structure up a proposal for how the levy is struck. It's complex. The lawyers are involved, which makes it even more complex. And I'm afraid I don't have a time frame for you, but 100% it's coming back for your consideration.
From an LGA perspective, council will need to agree on the final proposal that we make to CIP, that they then take to the Crown to create the order in council and strike the levy. So you councillors will sign that off.
I just wonder whether officers, just thinking about the forward programme for this committee, the next time we look at it, that you consider when you want to slot the next stage in terms of the funding financing aspect, noting that you're already going to infrastructure on the technology solution. Yeah, okay. Mayor Foster, have you another question, or is it just your hand still up?
Take it down.
Okay.
I've taken it down already.
Okay, thank you. I see no one else has got their hands up, so I'm going to ask Councillor Foon to move the motion. And Councillor Foon, do you have I think it was Councillor Pannett was going to second. Is that?
I was hoping Councillor Rush was around, but if he's not, I'll happily take Councillor Pannett.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, floor's yours, Councillor Foon.
Great. Okay. Kia ora tātou, and thank you so much to officers for an excellent introduction and keeping us informed and alongside the IFF process. I hope that will stop some of my emails to you. So as I'm being regularly just asking where we're at. I'm also very keen to see, very happy to see that there's a real partnership process going on here, and that we're trying a new, like being one of the first for the IFF funding with the government, and that we're working with their project teams there, but yet we're also working with Wellington Water, and it seems like an ease of collaboration that has come to pulling the Wellington Water team in-house to be able to carry on with the project. So I do want to thank everyone for that spirit of collaboration on this project. And while we're here, I won't go into the details of the why. I think Sarah gave a really good outline there, but I do want to note the $6 million for ETS fees that we discussed in the last paper. This is $3 million per year. So the why really, not only are there all the resilience and environmental aspects, but actually that is a huge amount of money to be paying out if we don't need to. And so really what we're seeing is that this project will help us to be able to reduce that amount per annum. And that amount is only set to go up, by the way. I think to progress, what I'm really loving about this project is that I think it really helps us to be known as a city of innovation in the circular economy, and that, yeah, that we are, it's a bit of a leadership move here. So I just want to thank not only what we're doing, but how we're doing it through the IFF fund. And I must finish off by saying, I'd really love a look at those legal papers and the conversation around who pays for it, because I think it will be something like, whose poo is it anyway? There you go. Just trying to bring some humour to the morning. Hope it helps.
Thank you. Councillor Pannett, do you wish to speak?
Yes, I do. And just to say thank you to staff and Councillor Foon for leadership on this issue. And just really the basic point is it's just fantastic to see that there's another funding mechanism that we're using. We don't have enough money to pay for all that infrastructure. So this is great that we've got another option here that we will eventually get back. So I'm very happy to support this, and obviously hope that when it comes to the infrastructure committee, that we will choose the best solution for the environment. Kia ora.
Okay, so I'm also conscious of time, and we've still got a number of papers to move through. So does anybody else wish to speak to this paper? No. So Councillor Foon, I take it you don't need a
no need.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, I will now put move the motion forward. Can you please vote? Everybody's keen, so I'm sure you all want to take it together. So Councillor Young. Councillor Young, are you able to vote? Are you there? Yep. Thank you. All right. So
that's passed unanimously, I presume.
Thank you. Yes. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. I'm keen to get on to the next paper. Okay, the next paper is the performance reporting framework, and I welcome Lloyd Jowsey and Baz Kaufman to introduce the report and the presentation, which you should have all received a copy of yesterday afternoon.
Yes, good morning, councillors, and thank you, Chair. Lloyd Jowsey speaking. I'll just share my screen with you in a moment. My intention was to go through take the paper as read in terms of what's in your agenda, and then just go through these particular slides with you, and perhaps take questions at the end. Having said that, I'm also very happy to actually sit down with any councillors individually and walk them through what we're doing here, and answer any particular questions, or take any questions or any thoughts or ideas by email as well. So totally open to what works with you, particularly in the current environment. I'm assuming you.
Yeah, sorry, Lloyd, and I think also, given that we had the presentation yesterday afternoon, I think you can assume that everyone has read it, so it will enable you to be briefed through it, and then there may well be questions for it, but thank you.
Happy to do that. I'll skip through it and not focus too much on bits and pieces, just try and keep the salient points here.
Yeah.
I think that's what it covers. Firstly, just in terms of why we're doing this, again, I think that's relatively self-explanatory for councillors. Having said that, one of the things we've tended to do in our performance reporting so far is to respond to what's in front of us. So we've tried to meet all requests at one time, and that's been a big ask without any formal structure behind it. So the new committee structure, I think, provides us with a real opportunity to improve what we report to you and make sure that that's consistent and joined up. That's particularly important because the challenge that we put in front of ourselves to have a look at that is that one there. And I can kind of sort of see that in all of your questions today and some of your observations to me as well. That's what you'd like to know.
No.
Just moving through this, in terms of where we've been going to in this whole exercise, is we've been having a really good, long, hard look at what we do in relation to the LTP. And the LTP obviously provides us with that opportunity to look at how we're reporting against that document, which is something we tended to have not to do in the past. So that's going to be a key shift in this, because you obviously have big delivery expectations around that, and there's a need to know to understand what progress is. I'd also make just a quick observation here too, is that there is a distinction between delivery, risk, and spend. They're all related, but they're not necessarily the same thing. And I think in the past, we've tended to put a lot of pressure on our financial reporting by using it as a proxy for the non-financial side of the business. And that of course, is a big lag effect sitting in there. So what we want to do is make that connection between non-financial and financial reporting a lot stronger. Having said that, we don't want to duplicate what goes to other committees as well. So one of our key focuses at the moment is not to try and duplicate that. So what have we been doing? A couple of things we needed. One of the things that we've noticed is that those terms, performance oversight and performance monitoring, are sprinkled right throughout terms of references of committees. So there's a bit of an issue there in terms of what do we mean by those. And in relation to this committee, we've put in place a couple of working definitions. And we've taken more of a governance perspective of that and talked about oversight being as the direction in relation to the strategy being the LTP, and the organisation as a whole. How is it as a whole going? And the monitoring bit deals with, okay, what are some of the key aspects of that strategy? How they go in terms of periodically? What are some of the key changes we've seen in there, or variances against our KPIs and those sorts of things sitting in there? So the two dimensions there have an important impact in terms of what we report. Some of the questions we've been asking ourselves, and I won't run through those as we go through this whole process, have been quite fundamental, and we've deliberately done that because what we wanted to do is to come up with some sort of organised structured framework which has line of sight across the organisation. And that's what this little diagram does here. It kind of sort of maps on the front triangle there the various levels within our organisation. On the side of it, you can kind of see the various performance tiers we've got there, and supporting those other measures and the measurement frameworks that we have there. This particular framework was we want to roll out both for our reporting to yourselves, to councillors and committees, as well as our internal reporting and monitoring as well, because you can't have one without the other. They need to be joined up. And I think I'd concede one of the issues that we've had in the past is councillors have struggled to see line of sight across that. So the quarterly report is obviously focuses on that top layer, and that's where we're focusing the further development of the quarterly report. I want to make the point that I know a number of councillors have said to me there's a lot we like about the existing report, and we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we do need to recognise we need a shift in focus to be able to do what this committee does around its overall oversight and performance of that. So that's where the focus of the quarterly report will be. As we move through this project, we'll be looking at a lot of other reports, synchronising with what goes to the infrastructure committee, for example, making sure we don't duplicate things and making sure we've got the views and positioning right so you can answer that fundamental question I put at the start. In terms of the structure of the report itself, what we see happening is covering those two sections, oversight and monitoring. The first part up there, you can see, and those little numbers across the top, that really describes what you'd see in each one of those sections. We're trying to make it as rolled up and as meaningful as possible. So we've talked a lot about looking at material changes. And if something's on track, you need to know it's on track, but that's all. And also looking at the key strategies and projects, some of the things that we haven't reported from the past. So we've got some important strategies and policies which we need to report progress on those as well as our quarterly KPIs in the LTP, as well as the budget performance. And that monitoring section has really been where we've been sitting at the moment in terms of our quarterly reports. So the big shift is going to be this oversight section, as well as providing slightly more rolled up views and not duplicating what some of the other committees might do. And that's a bit of an emerging picture at the moment, and we're working with various officers across the business to do that. Digging down into detail, I've set out there for you a bit of a summary in terms of what each section would cover. And the oversight view is a lot more extensive than what we've done in the past itself, and really giving you that LTP direction view. And that's the important bit around there, looking at things such as projects, progress around that, what's the impact it's having, what are some of the risks which might get in the way of that. So you've got that whole of business perspective. The monitoring view, more focusing on what we do now, although we want to do some tweaks around that once again to make sure that monitoring view talks to that oversight view. And probably what you're going to see some changes in there, you'll see a smaller number of KPIs, and I think you'll breathe a sigh of relief there. We've gone from about 215 down to 93. And those KPIs hopefully will be able to tell a more meaningful story. You'll also see a bit more focused analysis around any changes or variances in those KPIs as well, focusing on those things such as non-financial delivery, risk and spend as we move through there. So that quickly gives you a quick snapshot in terms of where we're going, what we're working on. And the Q1 report will focus on this monitoring view, sorry. The Q2 report will pick that up in terms of the project stuff in relation to the oversight view as well. And the reason why we're focusing on Q2 there is we are working with the PMO office to make sure that we're not duplicating information and we're telling complementary stories in that respect. So that just summarised what we're looking to do, and going forward, we're seeing this has been a phased expansion of this report. There are strategies and policies which are still under development, the economic wellbeing strategy, for example, and we're going to introduce those things in as we go, as they're developed and as they're signed off by yourselves. So I'll leave it at there. I'd be pleased to take any questions, feedback that make sense to you at this stage. And again, very happy to meet with you individually to actually take any feedback or give any suggestions or chew the fat on reporting. I'll stop there.
Okay, are there any questions? No, it seems that you're pretty clear in so much, Lloyd, that I know is still big picture stuff. And yes, so and obviously we're all looking forward to seeing the how this all comes together. I do see we've got a question from Councillor Fu.
Actually, it's just a comment. I just wanted to say I really like having the strategy and the policy in there. Like that's something I feel has been missing. So it's really exciting to see that will come through as part of the performance as well. Thank you.
Yes, and I would concede that's an area that we have wanted to have greater focus on. Having said that, we're working through it, the process. You won't see that immediately, but that will be phased in. That's clearly an intention of ourselves, because that gives you the picture of the whole LTP and how we're going against progress there.
Thank you. And I don't think there's any other questions. Okay, so look, I will I'll move into debate now, and I'll be moving the motion. Do I have a seconder? See somebody put their hands up. Councillor Foon, you can, Deputy Chair. Look, again, look, I'd just like to thank officers for this. This has been a long journey that we've been on. And I mean, it is because we are, we recognize that we need to make the changes, but we were already in the process around the previous long-term plan, and so it really needed to come together after the after our last review of the long-term plan. So it's still probably going to be a work in progress, but we've actually now got a much better framework to be able to assess our city's performance in the environment, and I mean the I mean in the broader ecosystem environment. So look, and the presentations we've had, leading up to this and the shaping of that has given personally me a lot of confidence that that we're on the right track. I'm really looking forward to see how this does start to come together, and that we make sure that we do keep to that, for this committee, we do keep to that helicopter view, because it's important for us to make sure that we are joining the dots up right across the organisation, appreciating that some of the governors will be more interested in sort of the detail and some of the various aspects which will come through in other committees. But I do encourage you to take up Lloyd's offer if you are particularly keen to see where some measures may be, or how things are being monitored, in particular for your own for your projects that you're particularly interested in, is to talk with Lloyd, because we've the team will be working on this report and how it's going to be shaping up. So any feedback that they get sooner rather than later, it helps them to provide a much better product in the end. So Councillor Foon, would you like to speak? You're on mute. No, you're on mute.
It's nice to feel like I'll be able to get excited about reporting. And I'm also really looking forward to, it's just great to see in point number 8, the considerable cross-business collaboration and coordination. And I think that really helps with the whole kaupapa of working together. So yeah, I'm excited to see this roll out. So thank you for all the work.
Thank you, Councillor Food. I don't see anybody else with their hand up, so we'll move straight. I'll now move the motion, which has been seconded by Councillor Foon. Those in favour, please vote green. Those against, red. Excellent, carried unanimously. Okay, now we'll move on to the next paper, which is the action tracking. And I think Sarah Hay is introducing the report.
Hi, not much, oops, hitting buttons multiple times. Not much to introduce here, but happy to take questions if there are any.
Are there any questions? Okay, doesn't look like it. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, the paper, and the actions are the actions. Okay, so we're going to move along. Since there's no questions, I'll be moving the motion. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Foon, is that your hand up? The second? Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think it's, as I said, the report's pretty self-explanatory. We're still in the early days of action tracking, but it's a really good process to see happening now. Yes, Councillor Foon, would you like to speak? No. Okay. Thank you. So I will now put the motion, which has been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Foon. Those in favour, please press red. Those against, green. And just Mayor Foster, are you online still? We need your vote, if you are. No, it doesn't. Except, yeah. Okay, but it is carried. Okay. Forward program.
Similar to the last paper, Chair, I will take any questions if there are any.
Okay.
The only thing I might add is that the balance sheet review paper, we are looking at a workshop on that before the committee meeting. There's a lot of information to go over.
Yeah, and as we know, financial elements, it does take a bit of support for us to all to understand some of them.
We'll learn some lessons from today.
Okay, so I don't see anyone their hands up with questions. So look, I'm going to move the forward program. As per, it's pretty self-explanatory, and as these things, they're always a work in progress as well as we add things in going forward. So do I have a seconder? Oh, thank you, Councillor Wolf. Would you like to speak? Thank you. All right, so I will now put the motion forward to the recommendation. You know how to vote. Okay. Councillor Young, are you there? Mayor Foster, are you there to vote? Thank you. The mayor's still there. So that's motion's carried. Okay, we're humming. Next on the agenda is the committee report from the Audit and Risk Subcommittee, which is essentially the health and safety report. I'd like to welcome I think Meredith Blackler and Jace Yulson to introduce the report in terms of the health and safety aspect and if there answer any questions.
Meredith will just be coming up under my name, but she will be sitting.
Okay.
Yes, she is. Yeah. Introducing the report.
Okay. We're expecting this to be at 12:30. Sorry, Chair.
You should know we're efficient in this committee, Meredith.
Fantastic. So I don't think Jason and Janine will know that this is on right now. Okay. So my ability to respond to some of the more specific health and safety questions may be limited. But Chair, as per your request to focus on the more due diligence related things, I have prepared some information around that to differ what we also present at Audit Risk Subcommittee. So thank you for providing some guidance on that. Particularly, you've asked us to talk about the progress around the health and safety and security review. So I wanted to let you know at this stage, the key findings from the external audit is what we were basing our action plan on, or as we commence our work on that. And those key findings were around investing in a cloud-based health and safety information management system. So we have commenced the procurement of that, and that is likely to be put in place mid next year, just because of the huge amount of work that goes into that and the complexity. And we just really need to make sure that whatever system we do end up choosing is fit for purpose for the range of activities across the organisation. The other recommendation was to implement a business partner model. That is part of the structure that I noted under number 8. And I'm happy to talk a little bit further about as well. That includes transitioning some of the existing roles within the business units that were health and safety into a centralised team to bolster up the capability for our advisory and then be able to support the maturity uplift across the organisation. And that's also because the external auditor found that we needed to improve the engagement with our other PCBUs. So where we have overlapping duties with contract managers, contract management, for example, we need to make sure that we are thoroughly versed and we have the capability, maturity, and the knowledge to do that extremely well. And retain a centralised corporate health and safety resource. So that's also relating to the work that we're doing. So the audit recommendation was that we complete a business case on resources required to reduce the current exposure, the risk exposure through the application of effective health and safety management practices, and enable an uplift in capability, health and safety performance, regularity and depth of assurance activities. So that's the stuff you guys really want to be knowing about as officers, and overall health and safety maturity and culture. So as you know, I've spoken about previously, we've adopted a new health and safety framework, a maturity model, and we scored on the 5-point scale, we were scoring between reactive and calculative. What we really want to do as an organisation, and where ELT has set the directions for us to be proactive. We think that is a realistic target, but of course it will take a number of time and it does require resourcing and capability and culture uplift as well. So as a result of all these things, we did present a resource paper to ELT on the 17th of June with sign-off for additional roles based on the risk profile assessment that was undertaken. The previous health and safety manager did unfortunately leave after his parental leave in the beginning of July, which has meant we've had to concentrate on a bit more BAU and the current work plan and the status quo due to the resourcing constraints. However, we have still managed to make some good progress. Our recruitment has been successful to appoint a new health, safety and security manager, Wendy Henderson, who you all know, she's the operations manager in PSR, and we're excited that she's starting on Monday. Due to the customer and community change, we were also able to move one of the internal roles over through consultation, so that's already occurred. Recruitment of 2 new roles will also commence likely prior to Christmas, noting that the market is very, very tight and it may take some time to fill these roles. An action plan is now a key priority for the new health and safety manager and team to pull together based on the recruitment, health and safety maturity framework and security maturity framework. We've also set up a security reference group, which has drafted a terms of reference to be approved, and it's considering how best to take ELT's commitment to increase our maturity from basic, which is where we scored under the government's protective security requirements framework. We're the very first council to adopt this, but we now need to figure out how we're going to go from basic to the level that ELT has required of us, which is managed at level 3. And that will take a few years to get to that point. And procurement team, as I said, have already started on the replacement for risk manager. Chair, you also asked me to talk about the obligations and maturity level around due diligence for officers. And this is a question that came up yesterday as well in Audit and Risk Subcommittee about what more can you be doing as officers and how can we support you to undertake your duties of due diligence. At this point, it's really knowledge-based. It's really important that we upskill you and go through another lot of training with you so that you can fully understand what the 6 key areas of due diligence are for you. They are outlined in the beginning of each report, and we have set up the reports for you to be able to undertake those duties. But other things that we really need you to do over and above is be able to commit the time to health and safety observations, to be able to come out, ask really good questions based on the knowledge that you've acquired, and to hold us to account as an organisation. Sorry, managing a bit. I will be sending out to you the Government Health and Safety Leads resource, the Institute Directors resource to support you to understand what they're saying that we should be doing as officers. And I'll send that out shortly, just noting that yesterday there were questions as well. But equally, I've been looking at the Government Health and Safety Lead suggestions around measures and indicators for how we can track officer performance. And so, for example, they've said number of health and safety training programs completed by officers, which we're working on, number of new pieces of health and safety information obtained to remain up to date in health and safety. So, for example, prosecutions, regulatory changes, court decisions, etc. So perhaps we can look at other things of keeping you up to date with the most recent case law around health and safety and be much more proactive with that kind of newsletter type information as well, where we've gathered it all in one place for you. Number of health and safety assurance results and data and that kind of thing as well. So I'm happy to send this all through and that we add a whole lot more measures for you to understand how you're doing in your role as officers. And finally, Chair, you asked for us to reiterate what the current response from a health and safety perspective is to the recent change in COVID levels. So it's been a bit of work because the alert level 2, as you know, is slightly different this time because of the Delta variant. So we've had to put additional measures in place around mask wearing, contact tracing, our facilities, capacity. But on top of that, we've done additional things. So we, for vaccinations and the Ministry of Health application we put forward, which was on was by us, but on behalf of the other councils and our CCOs. Fortunately, we never heard back from the ministry on that. However, we are looking to work with Runanga or Atia, social advocacy organisation and other providers to come in-house for our staff. And on top of that, we continue to source other vaccination opportunities for our staff and their families to be able to book vaccination. And additional security in venues was put in place to support public requirements for mask and contact tracing. That's as our public become more aware of what's required of them as they enter our facilities and to support our staff to be able to have that exchange and get them used to that behaviour requirement. We've supported staff who advised during lockdown that their home space was not fit for work and organising the delivery of items to assist in that, for example, IT-based or workstation setup. We ran a wellbeing program during lockdown over a 2-week period with a range of speakers. A pulse survey was sent out to staff around their wellbeing and how they were feeling supported, and the Chief Executive sent you that information when we got that. Discretionary was provided to staff to support them working from home with small children. That's because our stance was you are not working from home, you are trying to work from home during a pandemic, and because we know that it was really causing a lot of our staff a great deal of stress to try and fit in a full 8 hours while they had small children in the background or requiring their attention. For at-risk staff, we encourage them to register through sensitive events modules so that we can continue to monitor and support them. But equally, we had some staff through lockdown who were struggling to be at home, citing that they weren't feeling particularly safe or it wasn't conducive to their health. So we supported them as well. We're looking to support staff going forward in their home workspace setup through an all of government or discounted deals that they themselves have to purchase the equipment because we can't afford to purchase the equipment on their behalf, that we can support them in the purchase of that, whether that looks like they pay it off through payroll or we just give them the right contacts to get that discounted rate. We haven't worked through that at this point. Additionally, security support through alert level 3 and 4 was provided. Additional patrols of closed sites, including construction sites, was done. And we continue to work through with our construction areas around making sure they have COVID plans in place as well. So that's what we've been doing. It's been a busy time for us in COVID, but those are the main areas that you've asked for me to cover, and I'll take the rest of the report as read. I do have Jason and I believe Janine Megson, who is our Senior Health and Safety Advisor, online to answer any specific health and safety queries you may have. And obviously looking forward to having Wendy Henderson join us on Monday and continuing working with you to support you to be officers under the Act.
Thank you, Meredith, and to your team. I mean, in particular, it's I suppose especially in our community services area, but also for the health and safety during this this time of the COVID lockdown and even working through the different levels. So very much appreciate the extra work that you've had to put into this and giving us this level of confidence this is happening. And I think I should just say to my colleagues that, we are under the Health and Safety in the Workplace Act, we are deemed to be officers, one of those rare occasions when we are actually called officers. So it is really important that we are aware of our obligations as officers in this. So that's why it's very important that we as a committee of a whole do get to see the health and safety report and look at it in its own right. And that's why I wanted Meredith to sort of focus on the due diligence aspect, but then also from the the financial aspect, just to touch on that, that restructure and, that we had the funds to support the extra resources going in. And then, of course, in a timely way, normally these health and safety reports are looking back, over previous three to 6 months or annual events, but knowing that we've actually had, we've been in the last month, we've been in the midst of, a COVID lockdown and moving between the levels. So I think it's been really useful you to be able to give us that update. And it might be something that will be useful from our role as officers to, in particular for the COVID thing, perhaps maybe not a paper to this committee, but it could be in a way of an email or briefing about, what's happening around some of these measures that you're putting in and dealing with COVID, because I think it's really important because we know the staff will be, small children at home, you're having to work from home, that stress, you can't get through your work, and how the organisation is supporting them, which is excellent. I do have a question, and you may not have dealt with this, but just interested to understand is the council thinking, in terms of vaccinating employees, is there any thinking being done whether that's a sort of mandated requirement, or is it too early?
Yeah. Yeah, Chair, at the moment, none of our roles fit the government's requirements for us to be able to mandate it. Because there's certain criteria through WorkSafe we need to assess the roles against, and so that's around level of risk of exposure to COVID, and so obviously MIQ and border related roles, high level of risk, and then actually I don't know how I'm going to say this out, transmittability of COVID into the community. And so of course for our frontline staff that might be higher, but because we don't hit the first criteria of high exposure risk to COVID itself, we don't quite get there. Whether or not we can consider a vaccination policy going forward for new staff I'm still working through that, and I need to talk to obviously ELT on that and our unions. But at this point in time, even though some of us might be surprised that, for example, the waste team, who might you think would have high exposure, they're not considered to be high exposure. So we can't mandate it, but we are closely watching what the government are doing in regards to their health orders and whether or not they change any views on that.
And are you tracking in any way who's been, vaccination levels?
No, due to the Privacy Act, we're not allowed to ask staff if they have been vaccinated. Some staff may offer it or just tell you, but we can't even capture that information at this point in time. So what we're really trying to do is take an educative approach and make it as easy as possible for people to get vaccinations. That's why, during work time, they can go. They don't need to take any kind of leave to go and have their vaccination. And where possible, we're bringing the providers in-house.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? No, and I sat on the Audit and Risk Subcommittee yesterday, and I did, they gave the actual report, especially around the risks and the system, a good grilling as well. So, and I'm sure when Councillor Condi introduces the paper that she will touch on some of that. So, thank you, Meredith and the team, and for giving us such a fulsome report and that. So look, I will now hand over to Councillor Condi to move the paper. Councillor Condi, do you have a seconder?
Councillor Pannett, were you going to second it? Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, team. I just to give you a quick flavour of the conversation that we had yesterday at committee, we talked a little bit about the significant increase in capacity. So the team is going from 8 to 18 FTEs. Now, some of those, as Meredith said, are just coming from other parts of the organisation and being centralised. But you can see how much we're really uplifting the capacity in that space. We had quite a bit of conversation about personal confrontation issues and the de-escalation training that we're providing. Same as last time with COVID lockdown comes a lot of stress on our community, and that sometimes bubbles over into personal confrontation with our staff. And it continues to be the leading cause of kind of workplace injuries for us. So it's a really important area that we're discussing. We talked a bit about the critical risk observations, which is a new thing, which is fantastic. We've in the past, the teams have done these bow tie assessments of some of our nasty 9 and put in action plans. And the idea behind these critical risk assessments is they're going out and seeing, is the action plan actually being put in place on the ground? How much of the action plan is actually, can you see it on site? Which is awesome. And all of them were sort of scoring above 80% with a number of things. Obviously, some of these action plans, the actions take longer than others. So that's really pretty impressive for some of these action plans that are less than a year old to see how much has been delivered on the ground. And, at the committee as well, we sometimes get into asking specific questions about specific, incidents. So we did have a little conversation about the incident where someone had a head injury when they were trying to move a diving board, and just got some reassurance that, the manager had done full, concussion testing and all of these other things, so that we, we just know that all of these things are kind of being carried out. We got great, really detailed answers from all the staff who work there. And just while I've got you as well, just to let you know, we also had a lot of conversation at the committee about the internal audit report. And I just thought I would draw it to your attention for those who aren't on the committee. It's there was a great kind of overview that's just over 3 pages. So if you feel like going into the audit and risk papers on Diligent, and you can have a look at pages 33, 34 and 35. And they have a really good setting out about where we are at with our internal controls, which is all of these things around accountability and performance and integrity. And what it showed is that, a number of areas we're quite good, but a number of areas we're still kind of in the core, and we've got a long journey ahead of us. So we were talking about that quite a bit at committee as well, about the work that we need to do and that Barbara's leading to try and strengthen that internal capacity of the organisation, and build our capacity in those areas. So if you're interested, I thought that was worth everybody having a quick look at, just so that you're kind of aware of where our performance is at so far, because the committee would certainly have the view that there's a journey ahead of us to improve there. And Councillor Pennant, thank you for seconding. Would you like to add anything?
Thank you, Councillor Condon. You've been very comprehensive. So I just want to thank staff. Ms. Blackler, you and your team are doing a great job. I know you're well regarded by people outside the organisation, so thank you for that. It's an incredibly important responsibility. So we did have some discussion about whether we were meeting or doing enough to meet our obligation as officers, and the new independent chair had some similar questions. So we will be hearing more about that, apart from the observations, which have been a little bit disruptive at times. It's probably time for another workshop just to make sure that we are exercising those functions. Also, look, I think it's reassuring that staff are taking these things very seriously. I think we always need to continue to keep practicing though, because in the case of that Councillor Connie mentioned, I did ask whether that staff member should have just been sent home. It's a matter of routine that head accidents should be treated extremely seriously, but we're getting some more feedback about that. And just the other thing, it was mentioned in public about looking at our risk management around malicious attacks. That is not for public discussion, the actual content, but I'm glad to see that it's being done. There would have been a time I would have thought it wasn't such a risk, but obviously we've now had some terrible instances where the public have been put at risk, and we need to do some planning around that. So I'm glad to see that staff have been so proactive. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Pennant. Councillor Day.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi kia koutou iti wiki o te reo Māori. I really just wanted to quickly thank the officers for such a comprehensive report, and really good to hear that the team are getting more resourcing to be able to make sure that we are getting everything covered that we need to. And I just want to say I've had, over the last couple of months, had the experience of seeing an accident that happened in public from both the council side and then the residents who had the accident, and have to say I've been totally blown away by the professional and proactive response of council. There's been thorough investigation, and the communication has been excellent with the family who had accident. And I just have to say that the really exciting thing is actually seeing that connect to a response to make sure that we don't have that accident again. I think it's been really reassuring to see that every step along the way, council has been there and has been thinking ahead. And I really just want to thank the staff. I know that my friends who had the accident feel really that council has been very responsive, and so yeah, just really wanted to pass that on in this context that we're seeing it's working, and that is really reassuring. So thank you.
And yes, I just want to reiterate my thanks to the officers. It's a very visible role in this, because if you certainly don't get it, if you don't get it right, there's risk of serious injury. So just to say thank you to officers, and I think it's going to be really important. I know officers talked about providing us with more information as elected members. And I think that would be really useful, of pulling all that together into a briefing, so that we are being kept up to date, and we have an opportunity to make sure that we're fully conversant with the different elements. Councillor Foon.
Thank you, Chair. Out of the Audit and Risk Committee last week, I did just want to flag the safety of the parking team, that they are often the ones, if you go through the port, that are really taking the personal confrontation, having to deal with that. And as we acknowledged, when the stress levels go up, but it's really quite disturbing to read. So you know, that we do have members of our community that can be so disrespectful to another human being. So I just want to flag it, keep it up top, and just let all of us know that it is a heightened area at the moment. So, and I just want to make sure that officers know that we are fully behind any decisions made, you know, that need to get made with staff safety at the front of that. So just bringing awareness into that space as well. Thank you.
All right, and now the speakers, Councillor Condi, right to reply.
Just very quickly, thanks Councillor Pennant for talking about the malicious attack conversation that we had, which most of which happened in public excluded, but as Meredith said, we're actually the first council who are taking on these new government guidelines around security. And those guidelines actually were prepared after, you may recall, there was an attack on a WINS office. Somebody went into a WINS office and a worker there was killed. And those guidelines were developed after that. And for councils, they're optional. And we are the first council to say we're going to try and look at these and see how we can incorporate them into our work, which is really great. Thanks, Councillor Day, for talking about seeing how it's working. It's really great to kind of hear that on the ground, and it's another area that we're really seeing improvements and seeing some that it's working is near miss reporting. We're actually seeing our near miss reporting going up, which is one of those things where you might think, oh, that's not good that we're having more near misses, but actually what we're seeing is people are taking near misses more seriously. This culture of that we don't even tolerate near misses is really improving, and so we're starting to see that come back in our reporting, which is great. And yes, Councillor Foon, the parking wardens are some of our frontline staff, and it is quite disturbing to see some of the things that they have to deal with. You know, our staff are we did have a conversation about that with our staff, and they are very careful in terms of having the wardens are working in pairs at the moment. You'll probably all be aware of that, but also that if they do have an incident like that, they immediately, I suppose, they come back to base. And you know, we don't necessarily expect them to go back to work after that if they've had a difficult confrontation. So just, you know, to assure you that there's some really good processes in place when they've had to deal with something like that. There's a lot of support around them, and that, you know, if we do get to a situation, you know, there were plans in place to pull wardens off the street if we did feel like it just wasn't safe enough for them to be out there at the time. So, you know, there are different ways of managing that, but I agree with you, Councillor Foon. It's sad that members of our community kind of are taking out that their stress and aggression on another person who's just on the street, trying to do their job. So, but yes, thank you all to staff, and thank you for the excellent discussion. As we all know, you know, health and safety is one of our really key legislative obligations, and I know that we all take it seriously to make sure that we can deliver on that.
Councillor Condi. So I will now put forward the motion that's been moved and seconded. You're all ready to vote, and I don't think there was anything else that came from the Audit and Risk Subcommittee, was there? So that was just that existing recommendation. Leaving early, yeah. So we've had Councillor Fitzsimons. It's carried. Thank you. Right, so I think I've declared it carried. So thank you all for I think we've got through a lot this morning, and thank you all for being there on Zoom. And thank you to the officers for your presentations as well and answering the questions that we've had. We've made some good progress this morning, and we're breaking just in time for lunch as well. So look, I'm just going to do the closing karakia, and especially in Maori language week. I hope my pronunciation, I'm trying my best. So thank you. So unahia, unahia, unahia ki te ura tapa nui. Kia wātea, kia mama, te nako, te tinana, te wairua. Iti ara takatu. Koira e ronga. Whakara i ria, aki ki ronga. Kia wātea, kia